So I said that I would say a few words about William Barclay. He was a professor of divinity and biblical criticism in Glasgow University. He lived from 1907 to 1978. He was a professor in Greek and Hebrew, so well qualified to translate the scriptures. He was attached to the Church of Scotland, but he didn't believe in the Trinity. He said that in the New Testament there was no evidence of a Trinity, that Jesus was the Son of God. Now, as mentioned in the comments in the last video, William Barclay was not too keen on Jehovah's Witnesses. Hate is too strong a word for William Barclay. He didn't hate anybody. But he believed that the witnesses were somewhat dishonest in their translation of the scriptures, that they translated it according to what they wanted to believe, not the other way round, which is the criticism that Jehovah's Witnesses put into other religions. However, anyway, if you can get hold of this book, New Testament Words, it's a great help to Bible study. Now, he's talking here about love, God's love for us. So we'll start off in 1 John 4 and verse 8. And you know the verse very well. It's God is love. But the context is good. To you whom I love, I say, let us go on loving one another, for love comes from God. And then he says, for God is love. Now that's the most important verse in the whole Bible. We need to recognize that God's uppermost quality is that of love. And so whatever we're doing, we need to remember that, because it will help us through each trial. It goes on. To us, the greatest demonstration of God's love for us has been his sending his only Son into the world to give us life through him. We see real love not in the fact that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to make personal atonement for us. If God loved us as much as that, surely we, in our turn, should love one another. A tall order, but it can be done. So William Barclay goes on, there's a long list here of love, but I've just picked out a couple of things. God's love is merciful. Ephesians 2 and verse 4. Here we are. It says here, God loved us with so much love that he was generous with his mercy. And if we can copy that, if we can be merciful to our fellow humans, life will certainly be much better. Then he talks about God's love is a strengthening love, and through it man becomes more than a conqueror. And he quotes Romans 8:37. But before we look at it, he says that this love is not the softening and overprotective love which makes a man weak and flabby. It's the love which makes heroes. So with that in mind, we'll have a look at Romans 8, and we'll look at the context. Because in verse 31 it says, after saying this, what can we add? With God on our side, who can be against us? And in verse 35, nothing, therefore, can come between us and the love of Christ, even if we are troubled or worried or persecuted or lacking food or clothes, being threatened or even attacked, as the scriptures promised, for your sake. Sorry, just turn the page. We are being massacred daily and reckoned as sheep for slaughter. These are the trials through which we triumph by the power of him who loved us. So how do we triumph with God's love? Well, not physically, because we end up being physical wrecks for various reasons, but we experience God's love through these trials, and then we know that if we go through any more trials, that God's love will see us through it. Not only that, but it gives us empathy for other people, for what they're going through. We stop judging people because we know that life is difficult and that all of us have need for God's love. Now, here's a problem. You cannot regulate love. Now, the scribes and Pharisees wanted to regulate everything. On the Sabbath, you had minute laws about what you could and couldn't do. Instead of teaching people to reason and to say, look, stand on your own feet, this is the law, you must reason as to what you can and cannot do. No, they had to regulate it. But the most important law of all, that you love your fellow man, can't be regulated. You can't say, oh, well, in this situation, this demonstrates love for your neighbour, and so on and so forth. Your neighbour is anyone who is in need. And the extent that we show love is what we're capable of, or what we have in our possessions to help, or whatever abilities. But our experience of God's love for us will help us to demonstrate the same love for our fellow man. So Watchtower, please will you study the scribes and Pharisees and turn away from them, their practices, because it really was the worst sin ever. But for us, the rest of us, yes, we're going away physically, but inside we're growing in our love for God and hopefully for each other. But thank you for watching this morning.